This movie gave me nightmares, and I have no idea why. Amityville II: The Possession is a 1982 horror film that serves as a prequel to 1979's The Amityville Horror. This film follows the Montelli family, who are loosely based off of the famous DeFeo family that lived in the Amityville house prior to the Lutzes. It is based off of the book Murder in Amityville, which was written in an attempt to explain why the mass murder occurred there in the first place. And in case it's any surprise, the explanation is supernatural in origin. So essentially, Amityville 2 is what I wanted to see from Amityville 1. They may have changed their names, and some of the facts might be a little bit askew and everything, but it does focus on the DeFeo family, even though they changed their names, and that's great, that's fine and dandy. That case alone is compelling. This movie has its own set of problems, though, because if you look at it as a prequel, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some continuity errors. Lots to cover, let's get into it. The people category was probably the worst thing about this movie. The acting particularly is pretty awful. Especially from the mom. Over the top, in your face, distracting, laughable, whatever. The best thing about this category is that the house plays a more prominent character this time around, and the character Sonny is a very interesting, colorful, memorable character in his own right, too. Also, the chemistry, not that bad. We're talking about a family that is disturbed and abusive and just crazy all around even before they went to the house. And they all sold that dysfunction pretty well, I think. The people category gets 55%, 11 out of 20. I think in general with the writing category, it had a more solid idea of what it was going for. First, you're not really thinking about that, but if you get into the mindset of the house as a character, you start to realize that it has a goal of its own, and throughout the film, it kind of centers on that. At the same time, it does bounce back and forth from side stories that don't really matter that much. The dialogue is important, though, because when it came down to the DeFeo murders, Ronald DeFeo, the murderer, actually said he heard voices in his head telling him to kill his family, and the same can be kind of repeated and mirrored in this film as well. Not in the same way, but voices are heard. Whenever you're hearing voices, dialogue's important to the plot. And because it's a dysfunctional family, and a family in general, it has a little bit of a backbone. It has a little bit of story depth going on there, which is nice to see. It's not fully developed, it's not fully investigated, but it's there. Writing category gets 7 out of 10. Weirdly enough, I really like the stuff going on behind the scenes in this film. With visuals, there's a lot of practical effects going on, especially with makeup and design. True enough, sometimes that makeup looks really, really awful and fake, but in 1982, it probably looked pretty real, pretty effectively scary, and it was important to them. They were focusing a lot of attention on that kind of detail. I also liked a lot of the camera work that they use in this film. Not always, but there are scenes in this movie where I was like, that's clever. Everything else here is pretty typical, but I am glad that they focused on making the movie look the best it could be when it came out. BTS gets 8 out of 10. The narrative structure is pretty solid other than the obstacles. Like I said, if you look at the house like a character, there's going to be a prime objective of what they're trying to do. But once it does what it's trying to do, it keeps on going when it probably shouldn't have. Basically, there is a very firm ending, and then it just kind of keeps going, and you're like, when is it actually going to end? Minor nuisance, 9 out of 10 for the narrative arc. The entertainment category goes over how rewatchable it is, how much of a good time you have while watching, your impulse to buy or own it, your impulse to talk about it or recommend it, and if it's engaging or riveting. I have shocked myself. I do consider this movie entertaining, but probably for the wrong reasons. In a lot of ways, this movie is so bad that it's good, especially when it comes down to the acting. That acting is so god-awful that it's hilarious. I watched this movie alone, but if I was watching with somebody, there were so many different times in the movie where I would just probably look over to them like, did that just really happen? That was awful. So I wouldn't mind rewatching it. I had a good time while watching. There are things in the movie that I consider discussion worthy, especially when you're comparing it with the real story with the DeFeos. And there are things in the movie that you feel like you can't pause with because it feels like something's gonna happen, which is what you want to see. It's not always there, but I digress. 5 out of 10. The specialty category goes over what you expect to see out of Amityville 2. As an Amityville movie, where does it compare? Once again, I have not seen them all, but I can see that this is very important. It serves as the prequel, but then again, it's not a perfect prequel. It gets a lot of stuff wrong, it ignores continuity errors, it ignores the time period it's supposed to take place in, especially when it has the guy walking around the house all the time with his Walkman. That didn't exist at the time period, sorry. It should have just stuck with the facts of the DeFeo murders because that alone is a very interesting and mysterious story. 5 out of 10. As far as sequels and prequels are compared, was this a necessary movie that people were asking for, and does it add anything new? Yes and yes. I can't really speak for the people in the early 80s. I don't know if they wanted to see another Amityville movie or not. The first one told a pretty complete story. But now, in modern day, you know there's a million Amityville movies out there, and there are now things you expect to see out of them. And for me, that was the DeFeo murders. That's what I wanted to see from the first movie. Didn't get to see it. Now it was in the sequel, so that's definitely what I wanted to see from it. So yes, I was demanding to see it. And did it add anything new? Yeah, I mean, the possession. That's the new thing. 10 out of 10. It is a horror film. Was it scary? Now I get to tell you my story. This might just be because I watched it at night and went to sleep immediately after. But I woke up from a nightmare. I thought I saw a shadowy figure standing in my walk-in closet. Whew. I can't say that when I was watching it, I really felt scared. There are things in the movie that felt spooky. There are things that were disturbing and uncomfortable to watch in general. The atmosphere felt genuinely evil. All that combined can create something like a nightmare. I'm only going to give this 5 out of 10 possible stars, but I want you to know that I did go back and forth thinking that maybe I could give it full points. Halfway decent. Did they make the movie they intended to make from the get-go? No. I mean, in some regards they did, some regards they didn't though, especially when it comes down to the acting. If it weren't for the acting, the movie really would be pretty decent. 5 out of 10 for halfway decent. 25 out of 40 possible stars for the specialty category. If we add up all those points, we get 65 out of 100 possible stars, 65%. It's like a D+. Guys, tell me what you thought of Amityville 2, The Possession, in the comments down below. And for YouTube, you know you can subscribe to me. Hit that bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. Until next time, peace.